The shattered ice. It was a cold winter evening when Jack Porter's peaceful drive home took a sharp turn. The wind had picked up, carrying a chill that cut through the stillness of the countryside, and the night sky was clear, stars sparkling like diamonds against the dark expanse. Jack, lost in the solitude of the back roads, had been enjoying the calm beauty of the landscape. It had been a good day, a quiet day, just the way he liked it. But then something caught his eye. Up ahead, just beyond the bend, the shimmering surface of Greenpoint Lake lay under a thick blanket of ice. What had once been a tranquil fishing spot in the summer was now an unforgiving sheet of frozen water. The lake's once glassy surface was covered in a thin crust of snow, blending seamlessly into the surrounding forest. Yet, as Jack's eyes focused on the center of the lake, something didn't sit right. At first, it had looked like a piece of driftwood. Maybe a fallen branch from the nearby trees, caught on the ice. But as Jack squinted, his heart skipped a beat. The shape, it moved. No, it wasn't a log. It was something else. Someone else. A child. There was a child in the water, struggling, his small form clinging desperately to the edge of the ice. Panic gripped Jack's chest like a vice. The world around him seemed to freeze in place, the sound of the engine fading into the background. His breath quickened, and his hands instinctively reached for the brakes as he slammed them down, the truck screeching to a halt. He didn't even wait for the engine to die before he threw open the door, stepping out into the icy cold air. His boots crunched against the frozen ground as he sprinted toward the lake. Charlie, his golden retriever, was already ahead of him. The dog had seen it too. Without hesitation, Charlie took off toward the lake, his paws sliding slightly on the frost-covered surface as he bolted toward the water. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he watched his dog push forward, instinctively rushing to help. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse that his dog was always the first to act in a crisis. "Charlie, stop," Jack yelled, but the dog didn't listen. When someone was in danger, nothing could stop him. Charlie's protective nature had always been evident, but today that loyalty would be tested beyond measure. As Jack neared the edge of the lake, his breath caught in his throat. He could see the child more clearly now, a small boy, no older than 5 or 6. His tiny fingers scraped desperately at the icy surface, his body half submerged in the freezing water. The child's face was barely visible, but Jack could hear the desperate gasps for air. It was a sound that would haunt him forever if he couldn't help. Jack's mind raced as he reached for his phone, his hands trembling. His heart was in his throat, but there was no time to make a call. The boy was slipping, and every second counted. Jack's eyes scanned the ice, trying to figure out the best way to reach the child. He couldn't risk going in too fast. If the ice cracked beneath him, he'd be in just as much danger. Charlie, however, didn't hesitate. The dog's sharp instincts kicked in, and he pushed forward, inching closer to the struggling boy. Jack could see the tension in his dog's body, every muscle in the retriever's frame taut with concentration as he neared the water's edge. Jack couldn't stop him. Charlie was already too far ahead. The wind bit through Jack's jacket as he reached the edge of the lake, his breath visible in the freezing air. The child's cries had grown fainter, and Jack knew that time was running out. He had to act now. "Come on, buddy," Jack muttered to himself, his voice barely a whisper. "Just hold on." Jack dropped to his knees, testing the ice beneath him. He spread his weight as evenly as possible, shifting carefully, but the sound of the ice groaning under him made his stomach drop. The last thing he needed was to fall through himself. But he couldn't wait any longer. The child was fading. Jack could feel it in his gut. Every breath was precious. Charlie was almost there. The dog's paws skidded slightly on the slick ice, but he kept pushing forward, determined. Jack's heart surged with a mix of fear and admiration for his dog. He had never been more terrified in his life. If Charlie couldn't get to the boy in time, there would be no saving him. Jack's pulse quickened, the sound of his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He could see the boy's head bobbing, and for a moment, Jack thought it was the end. The child's face disappeared beneath the water, and Jack's stomach lurched. "No," he shouted, as if the force of his voice could stop the inevitable. But it was too late. Charlie surged forward, ignoring the orders Jack was shouting, his teeth sinking into the child's coat. The dog's muscles bunched as he strained, pulling with all his might. Jack scrambled forward, reaching desperately for anything he could grab. The ice was thin, fragile. One wrong move, and it would shatter beneath them. But Charlie wasn't giving up. The dog yanked with all his strength, pulling the boy up onto the ice. Jack's heart skipped a beat as the child's body slid closer, and with one final desperate lunge, Charlie dragged him onto the surface. Jack dove forward, grabbing the boy's arm and pulling him fully onto solid ground. The boy coughed, his small chest heaving as he gasped for breath. Jack quickly pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the child, trying to warm him. His mind was spinning with the panic of the moment, but Charlie was already pressing close, licking at the boy's face, offering warmth and reassurance. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. The boy was alive. But the danger wasn't over. Jack could feel the ice shift beneath him, a constant reminder of just how fragile their situation still was. He needed to get them off the lake. And fast. "Charlie, let's go," Jack urged, but the dog remained by the boy's side, still tense, as if he knew the danger wasn't fully gone. Jack carefully scooped the child into his arms, his muscles straining under the weight of the frozen boy. The air was biting cold, but Jack's determination kept him moving. Every step was agonizingly slow. The ice beneath them creaked ominously, but Jack pressed on, careful not to move too quickly. The shore seemed so far away. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jack reached solid ground. He collapsed to his knees, still holding the boy in his arms. Charlie plopped down beside them, exhausted but alert. The boy was safe. Jack had done it. Charlie had done it. As Jack caught his breath, he looked down at the boy. His name was Toby, he whispered, and Jack's heart swelled with relief. He was alive, and it was all thanks to one extraordinary dog. A hero's burden. The cold night air bit at Jack's exposed skin as he knelt on the shore, still cradling Toby in his arms. Charlie, ever watchful, stood at their side, his body taut with the lingering tension from the dangerous rescue. Despite the boy's shivering form, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. He had made it. Toby had made it. But even as he whispered reassurances to the boy, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the worst wasn't behind them yet. The wind howled across the frozen lake, its chill creeping through Jack's soaked clothes. He could feel the icy sting of exhaustion in his bones, but there was no time to rest. The adrenaline from the rescue was starting to fade, and reality was settling in. The lake was still a threat. The boy was safe for now, but he was freezing, and Jack knew they needed to get out of the elements immediately. "Charlie, let's get him to the truck," Jack murmured, his voice raw with the effort of keeping his emotions in check. The dog responded immediately, nudging Toby's side with his nose, as if to say, "We're not done yet." Jack stood slowly, lifting Toby in his arms once more. The boy's head lolled against Jack's shoulder, his tiny body trembling uncontrollably, despite the layers of clothing Jack had wrapped him in. His breathing was shallow, and Jack knew hypothermia was setting in. Each step they took away from the lake felt like it took an eternity. The soft crunch of Jack's boots on the snow was the only sound in the quiet night, save for the occasional rustle of the wind. The truck was parked just a few hundred yards away, but in this biting cold, it felt like a lifetime. Charlie trotted beside them, his head low, tail stiff and alert, scanning their surroundings with a focus Jack admired. Despite his exhaustion, the dog remained vigilant, his instincts telling him to stay close, to guard, to protect. Jack's mind raced as he moved toward the truck, his thoughts drifting between Toby's well-being and the ominous crack of ice he had heard earlier. That crack had haunted him ever since. It was a constant reminder of the fragility of life, how quickly things could shatter. It hadn't just been the ice that could have given way. If Charlie hadn't reacted so swiftly, if the dog hadn't trusted his instincts, Jack didn't want to think about what would have happened. Toby might not have made it. He shook his head, forcing those thoughts aside as he reached the truck. The warmth from the engine was a welcome relief, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed to get Toby inside, out of the cold. Jack gently placed the boy on the front seat, hurriedly adjusting the heat to its highest setting. Toby's eyes fluttered open briefly, his lips trembling as he whispered something that barely reached Jack's ears. "Thank you, Charlie," Toby said, his voice weak, barely audible over the sound of the engine. His words sent a rush of warmth through Jack's chest, but it was quickly replaced with concern. The boy had lost too much warmth, too much energy. He needed medical attention now. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed 911. "I've got a child." He fell through the ice. Jack spoke urgently, his voice betraying his calm exterior. "Greenpoint Lake, by the old fishing docks. He's cold, but he's breathing. I need paramedics now." The operator's calm voice on the other end guided him through the next steps, but Jack's focus remained on Toby. The boy's shallow breaths were becoming more erratic, and his lips were turning an alarming shade of blue. Jack wasn't sure how long Toby had been out in the cold, but every second felt like an eternity. Charlie, sensing the heightened tension, jumped up into the truck, his wet fur leaving a trail of water as he settled down beside the boy. The dog nuzzled Toby's side, offering what little warmth he had left. Toby smiled faintly, his small hand reaching out weakly to pat Charlie's head. Jack's throat tightened. This was his dog, the same dog who had always been there for him. But tonight, Charlie had done something far greater than any of them could have imagined. He had saved Toby's life. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that without Charlie's quick thinking, Toby wouldn't have made it. It wasn't just loyalty at play, it was bravery. The kind of bravery that couldn't be taught. It was instinctual, and Charlie had acted on it without hesitation. Minutes later, the faint sound of sirens reached Jack's ears, a beacon of hope cutting through the silence of the night. He glanced at Charlie, who was now lying quietly by Toby's side, his head resting gently on the boy's chest. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. There in that truck was everything Jack had ever wanted to protect. His dog, his town, and now this boy, who, against all odds, had been saved. As the paramedics rushed to the truck, Jack stepped aside to let them work. They immediately began wrapping Toby in thermal blankets, monitoring his vital signs with efficiency born of experience. One of the paramedics glanced up at Jack, her face softening as she took in the situation. "You did the right thing," she said gently. "You got him here just in time." Jack nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He couldn't bring himself to say the words. His mind was still reeling from the night's events, but there was something in the way the paramedic spoke that told him she knew. She knew that, without Jack's actions, without Charlie's, they wouldn't be standing here, looking at a child who was still breathing. As the ambulance doors closed and the flashing lights disappeared into the distance, Jack felt a strange peace settle over him. The lake was still frozen, still dangerous, but there was warmth in his chest now. He looked down at Charlie, who was still panting, but a little less tense. Jack reached out, scratching behind the dog's ears, a silent thank you for all he had done. "Let's go home, buddy," Jack murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Charlie let out a soft huff and jumped down from the truck, trotting by Jack's side as they made their way back toward the cabin. The night had been filled with terror, but it had ended in hope. Toby was alive, and it was all because of one extraordinary dog. Jack had always known that Charlie was special, but tonight, Charlie had proven just how much more he was: brave, loyal, and a true hero. As Jack climbed into the truck, he glanced at Charlie, whose head was resting on the seat beside him. eyes half closed in exhaustion. Jack couldn't help but smile, his heart full of gratitude. "You did good, boy. You really did." The wind howled outside, but inside the truck, everything felt right. Everything felt like it was going to be okay. For now, that was enough. The unfinished journey. The next few days felt like a blur for Jack. Between the quiet aftermath of the rescue, the constant worry about Toby, and the lingering questions about the events surrounding the frozen lake, his mind never seemed to rest. The storm had passed, but in its wake, Jack was left with a deep sense of unease. There were still so many unanswered questions, and a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Something had been missed. Toby, despite the frightening ordeal, had made it through the worst of it. The doctors had worked quickly to stabilize him, and the boy was recovering at home. Jack had received updates, and while Toby's parents were deeply grateful, Jack couldn't shake the image of the boy's pale, frozen face, an image that haunted him in the quiet moments when he wasn't looking at his dog, Charlie. Charlie, for his part, had been exhausted after the rescue. Jack couldn't blame him. The dog had pushed through so much during that fateful night. Yet, despite his weariness, Charlie was as vigilant as ever. He never left Jack's side, always sensing when the man was troubled, his golden eyes soft with understanding. The phone rang late one afternoon while Jack was sitting in his cabin, staring out the window at the frozen lake that had nearly claimed Toby's life. The sight of the ice still unsettled him, its surface smooth and unyielding, a silent reminder of the danger that had been narrowly avoided. He glanced at the caller ID. It was Sheriff Hastings. "Jack, you might want to come by the station." The sheriff's voice was urgent but calm. "There's something you need to hear." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had been expecting this call, in a way. After the rescue, there had been talk of a mysterious 911 call, one that Jack hadn't fully understood. The voice had been frantic, desperate, but there had been no sign of anyone else when they'd found Toby. "On my way," Jack said, hanging up without another word. He grabbed his coat, ruffled Charlie's fur, and without another moment's hesitation, he headed out the door, the dog trotting beside him as always. The sheriff's station was only a short drive away, but the tension in Jack's chest grew with every passing mile. The unease he had felt since that night was still gnawing at him, a feeling that only intensified as he parked in front of the small building. Inside, the officers were moving with quiet urgency. They looked at him as he entered, their faces set with grim determination. Hastings was waiting for him in the back room, next to a radio. The young officer who had been on duty that night was replaying a 911 call. Jack's stomach turned as he recognized the voice on the other end. It wasn't Toby's call. It was someone else's. The words were jumbled, barely coherent, but Jack could make out a few chilling fragments. He fell through the ice. "I can't. Please, help. Someone help." Jack's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't Toby's call. This was a woman's voice, one filled with panic and fear, a voice that had been silenced when the call was abruptly cut off. Jack's pulse quickened, and he glanced at Hastings. "That's not the call we heard," Jack muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "Where did it come from?" Hastings rubbed a hand over his face. "We tried tracing it, but it came from a disposable phone. No name, no address. All we know is that it was made just before Toby's call." Jack's mind raced. Could there have been another person? A woman, maybe someone who had fallen through the ice herself. Hastings' words hung in the air. If there was someone else, and we didn't find them. Jack swallowed hard, the weight of the possibility settling over him. He had thought everything was over, that the danger had passed. But now, the sheriff's voice was filled with uncertainty. "We're sending divers out as soon as it's safe," Hastings continued, his voice tight. "But we need to know if you saw anything unusual. A shape, something out of place near the hole." Jack exhaled slowly, trying to recall the moments before they had found Toby. There had been a vague sense of something more, something unsettling in the air. But he had focused on the child in the water, on saving him. Had he missed something? Had he ignored a warning sign? "I thought I saw something," Jack said quietly, his voice low as he spoke. "When I first saw Toby on the ice, I thought it was just him. But the shape, it seemed bigger than just a child. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but—" The sheriff nodded, his expression grim. "We'll follow up on it, Jack. But I wanted you to know. If there was someone else, we need to find them." Jack's stomach twisted. He wasn't sure how to feel. The ice was cold, unforgiving, and it was a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong. They hadn't been able to save someone, and now they were trying to piece together a mystery that had only deepened with time. Charlie, sensing Jack's unease, nudged his leg gently, his eyes soft and reassuring. Jack bent down, resting a hand on the dog's fur. "What do you think, buddy? Did we miss something?" Charlie let out a soft whine, as if to say, "I don't know either." The dog's eyes were full of concern, but Jack knew better than to expect answers from him. Yet, in that moment, he felt a strange sense of comfort in Charlie's steady presence. It was as if the dog knew what Jack needed: calm, steady, unwavering loyalty. A few hours later, Jack stood outside by his truck, his mind heavy with the questions that had yet to be answered. The divers were out on the lake, searching the water once again, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there. The lake had nearly swallowed Toby whole, but the mystery of the other voice, of the woman who had cried out for help, lingered in his mind like a dark cloud. And then, as the wind picked up and the shadows lengthened, Jack heard something that froze him in place: a soft whimper. Charlie had been standing next to him, but now the dog was moving toward the tree line, his body tense, his nose low to the ground. Jack watched as Charlie stopped in his tracks, ears perked, tail stiff. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? He followed the dog, stepping cautiously into the woods as Charlie led him deeper into the snow-covered forest. And then, just ahead, Jack spotted something. A red scarf, half buried in the snow, caught his eye. He rushed over, his breath coming in shallow bursts as he pulled the scarf from the snow. It was damp, not fully frozen, as if it had only just been discarded. It hadn't been there long. Jack's pulse quickened as he looked around. The wind whipped through the trees, but Charlie was still focused, his nose buried in the snow. Then, as if guided by some unseen force, Charlie moved forward, weaving through the trees. Jack followed, every step quicker now, heart racing as Charlie led him deeper into the forest. And there, beneath a thick layer of snow, they found her, a woman, unconscious, buried under the cold, waiting to be found. Charlie had done it again. Without hesitation, Jack pressed his hands to the woman's neck. Her pulse was faint, weak, but it was there. She was alive. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jack wrapped his coat around her, feeling the urgency of the moment. Charlie lay down beside her, offering his warmth. Minutes later, the sirens wailed in the distance, cutting through the quiet. Jack met Hastings' eyes, a quiet understanding passing between them. They hadn't missed her. She was alive, thanks to Charlie's instincts. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Jack looked down at his dog, who was still watching the woman with steadfast loyalty. Charlie had done it again. He had saved someone when no one else could. And for Jack, that was enough. The lake had nearly claimed 2 lives, but Charlie had made sure that at least one more person would have a chance to live. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.